Chapter 1: The Memory of Crystals, Awakening the Atlantean Blueprint. There are places on this earth where time feels thinner, where silence carries an ancient echo. You've felt it before. Standing among stones older than history, your skin tingles, your breath deepens, and something within you remembers, not through thought, but through resonance, not in words, but in vibration. Memory is not just something we carry in our minds. It is something the earth carries in her bones. The Atlanteans knew this. They knew that memory, true memory, is vibrational, that it can be stored not in books or scrolls, but in the very fabric of matter, in crystalline grids, in the lattice of light, in quartz, in amethyst, in selenite. They weren't merely interested in what crystals looked like. They understood what crystals were: living tools.
Conçu archive.
Atlantean technology was not built. It was grown, tuned, awakened. They used sound to program quartz like we use code to program computers. Only their programming wasn't digital, it was energetic. They would speak, chant, and tone into a crystal, embedding information through harmonic resonance. A note, a mantra, a focused thought. The crystal would hold it, like a tuning fork that never stopped vibrating. Imagine a library, not of pages, but of light. Columns of clear stone, humming with color and memory. You wouldn't read it, you would feel it. The right frequency, the right alignment, and suddenly the knowledge would be yours, not as data, but as knowing. The kind of knowing that settles in your body like something you always knew but forgot. This was Atlantean crystal tech. It wasn't mechanical, it was conscious, and it wasn't used for power. It was used for alignment. Crystals were the central processors of an energetic civilization. Entire cities were constructed over crystalline beds that pulsed with Earth's natural frequency. The buildings themselves were infused with stones chosen for their energetic properties. There were rooms for healing, where violet stones bathed the soul in transformation. Rooms for learning, where golden calcite and kyanite helped attune memory. Rooms for soul travel, encoded with moldavite and clear quartz to assist astral projection. The architecture was alive, but more than that, it listened. Atlantean scientists, though that word barely does justice, were initiates of frequency. They didn't just measure energy, they communed with it. They knew each crystal had a consciousness, a subtle awareness, and that intention mattered. You couldn't just force energy into a stone. You had to ask permission. You had to harmonize. What modern science sees as inert matter, the Atlanteans recognized as sacred life. Each stone a being, each mineral a keeper, each grid an amplifier of soul purpose. And they built their technology accordingly. One of the most profound expressions of this was the crystal matrix, a vast system of interlinked stones embedded throughout their temples, chambers, and towers. These stones acted like neural nodes, creating a consciousness grid that connected not just buildings, but people. A group of healers in one city could send intention and light to another thousands of miles away, instantaneously, through crystalline transmission. Not with electricity, with resonance. Thought, aligned with emotion, amplified through sacred geometry, broadcast via stone. Does it sound impossible? only because we've been taught to forget what matter truly is. Modern science will eventually catch up. It is already discovering what ancient mystics knew: that crystals can hold charge, that they vibrate in precise frequencies, that they can transmit, amplify, and even store information. Our computers run on silicon, the base element of quartz, but we use it in fragments, barely scratching the surface of what it can do. The Atlanteans, by contrast, were not limited by code. They were the code. They didn't type into computers. They meditated into crystals. They didn't extract energy from the earth. They harmonized with her rhythms, drawing power through sacred intention. And the reason this has been buried is not because it's fiction, but because it's freedom. Because if you understood what crystals really are, if you knew that your own voice could awaken one, that your focused thought could store memory into a stone, that your body itself is surrounded by crystalline structures, tiny biocrystals in your pineal gland, your bones, even your DNA, you'd realize you've been carrying the Atlantean blueprint all along. And that's the part they fear, not the myth, the remembering. Because here's the truth: you've done this before. You've stood in temples that glowed from within. You've laid your hands upon stones that pulsed with stars. You've spoken to crystals and felt them speak back. And in your dreams, you still do. The grid is still there. It never vanished. It simply fell out of phase, waiting for a time when human consciousness would rise enough to tune in again. And that time is now. So next time you hold a crystal, don't ask what it can do for you. Ask what it remembers. Ask what it's waiting to share. And then listen, not with your ears, but with your vibration. Because beneath the silence, the crystals are still singing. Chapter 2: Sonic Architecture, Temples That Sang Back. What if walls could speak? Not in language, but in tone. Not through words, but through resonance. What if every step you took inside a sacred temple wasn't just movement through space, but alignment through sound? The Atlanteans understood something we have forgotten. Architecture is not just structure, it is frequency frozen in form. Each wall, each corridor, each chamber was a note in a larger chord. And when a being entered that space, they didn't just walk, they harmonized. They were tuned. The temples of Atlantis were not buildings in the way we understand them. They were instruments. Their geometry was deliberate. The ratios, sacred. The materials, vibrationally precise. These were not shelters from the elements. They were resonance chambers, designed to calibrate the human body like a stringed instrument. You see, Atlantean architects weren't engineers. They were tonal geomancers. They began not with blueprints, but with frequencies. They asked, what vibration must this place hold? Then they would choose the angles, materials, and alignments to embody that frequency. The result? Spaces that sang, not audibly always, but energetically. Rooms that made your heart beat in perfect coherence with the earth. Halls where the walls subtly hummed your soul's name back to you. These temples weren't passive. They were interactive. And when ceremonies began, when sound echoed through their chambers, toned by the voice, the drum, the flute, the architecture would respond. Stones would amplify the frequency. Walls would carry the tone forward. reflecting it in spirals and nodes. And the human body, standing at the center, would be bathed in harmonic waves that healed, awakened, and aligned. It wasn't worship, it was attunement. The Atlanteans had mastered what we are only beginning to rediscover. That sound is the scaffolding of form. That vibration precedes matter. That to change the body, the mind, the soul, you must first change the tone. They built this into everything. Even their cities were laid out as musical systems. From the air, their streets traced sacred geometry. Each plaza, each structure, corresponded to a specific note in a harmonic scale. Walk the city and you walk through a song. Not a song of the ears, but of the field. Your aura sang back, and the city heard you. Some of their most powerful structures, those we now call temples, were designed around the principles of resonance and entrainment. Deep chambers where monks would tone single syllables for hours, sounds spiraling upward through domes. Cavities placed behind walls to echo frequencies back at just the right delay. Columns cut to channel overtones. Ceilings shaped to capture cosmic vibration. Every detail mattered, even silence, because silence wasn't absence. It was presence of the inaudible octave, the deep note of the void. Modern science has touched this truth. We know sound can levitate objects. We've seen sand form mandalas in cymatic patterns when vibrated. We know the body responds to tone, that certain frequencies heal, others harm. But the Atlanteans went further. They didn't just use sound, they became sound. They learned to control the frequency of their own voices with such mastery that they could unlock chambers with a chant, ignite crystal systems with a hum, or send energy across vast distances with a tonal breath. Their sacred singers, once initiates of deep study, could tonally map a body and sing it back into coherence. Disease to them was discordance. Healing was harmony, and the temple was the tuning fork. When they sang, the walls would shimmer, and when the rituals aligned just right, the very air would bend. Time would soften. Space would feel as if it folded into itself. Not metaphor, literal experience. Because when enough resonance builds in a field, reality itself becomes pliable. This wasn't magic. It was mastery, the kind born not from belief, but from deep communion with the fabric of existence. But as with all sacred technologies, there came a time when the tones were twisted. Some began using sound not to uplift, but to dominate. They learned to embed suggestion into tone, to control minds with melody, to open not just hearts, but vulnerabilities. The same resonance that once healed was inverted into control. This was part of the fall. The temple still sang, but the songs began to fracture, and in time silence returned. But the knowledge wasn't lost. It was buried, encoded in ancient chants, in old architectural ratios, in the whispered memory of sound-carved stone. Egyptian pyramids still hum at 432 Hz in their inner chambers. Tibetan monks still chant tones that open energetic meridians. Even Gregorian chants hold overtones that mirror lost harmonics of the past. These are echoes, reminders that the world was once in tune and can be again. Because the architecture of Atlantis was never just physical. It was energetic. And the real temple is you. Your body is an instrument. Your voice is a transmitter. Your field is a harmonic structure awaiting retuning. And when you remember that, you will realize the temples never stopped singing. You just forgot how to listen. Chapter 3, Bioluminal Bodies, the Energetics of Divine Form. They taught you to see your body as dense, as solid, as biology locked in a cage of chemistry. But the Atlanteans saw differently. To them, the body was never just matter. It was light made slow, a luminous vessel vibrating through layers of frequency, a prism refracting the soul's infinite energy into form. And once you understand this, everything changes. You stop asking how to fix the body. You begin asking, how do I tune it? Atlanteans lived in direct relationship with energy, not as an idea, but as perception. They saw your aura the way we see your shadow, obvious, responsive, ever-present. They saw chakras not as symbolic wheels, but as spinning lenses of color and sound. And they understood that your physical form was only the outermost ripple of a much deeper, much more complex harmonic system. You are not flesh first. You are frequency first. And your true body, the bioluminal body, extends far beyond your skin. Atlantean healers were not surgeons. They were frequency weavers. They didn't cut. They listened. They attuned to the field around your body, reading the vibrations of your thoughts, emotions, and memories, not with machines, but with inner vision. They would place their hands near you, feel the subtle distortion, and gently begin to sing or tone or place a crystal, not on your skin, but in your energy, until the dissonance resolved into harmony. You didn't need to speak your trauma. Your field already did. In their temples, healing was a rebalancing of light architecture. Color, vibration, intention, all used with exquisite precision. They knew that your endocrine system was not merely hormonal, it was a physical reflection of your energy centers. Pineal gland, third eye, thymus, heart field, adrenals, root. Each gland, a gateway. Each organ, a chorus in your internal song. And if that song fell out of tune, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, the body responded. But they never blamed the body. They listened to it. And through that listening, they learned to realign it. Sound played a central role. Certain tones were known to activate specific meridians. Others could dissolve energy blockages or even stimulate regeneration. Not theoretically, literally. You see, the Atlanteans understood that cells are not just biology. They are tiny instruments, resonating with your thoughts. Modern science is starting to catch a glimpse. We now know that your DNA emits photons, particles of light, that your body has bioelectric fields, that your heart generates the strongest magnetic field of any organ. But what they don't yet see is what the Atlanteans knew by heart. That consciousness is the conductor. Every belief you carry, every unprocessed emotion, every habitual thought sends a wave through your field. These waves shape the electromagnetic fabric of your cells. Change your emotion, change your chemistry, shift your vibration, and the entire body recalibrates. Atlantean children were trained in this from birth. They weren't taught anatomy through diagrams, but through light, through meditation, through song. They learned to feel energy flows, to cleanse their field daily through breath, through sacred movement, through communion with earth and sky. Because the real body, your divine form, is not visible. It's vibrational. And illness to them was always secondary. A signal, a whisper from the deeper self that something within the field had gone forgotten. To heal was to remember, to reintegrate what had been cast into shadow, to bring light where light had been lost. Some Atlantean adepts could even alter their own cellular functions through focused intention alone. They understood how thought crystallizes form, how attention, held with clarity and love, can literally reshape tissue, rewire pathways, rebalance systems. We call this miracle. They called it hygiene, because when your perception is clear, so is your energy. And when your energy is clear, the body follows. This is why the fall of Atlantis was not just technological. It was internal. As the collective lost connection with their inner resonance, the body too began to degrade. Lifespans shortened, sensitivities dulled, the luminous body dimmed, and yet that blueprint still lives inside you. Your pineal gland still pulses with piezoelectric crystals. Your heart still responds to coherence. Your DNA still emits light in spirals, just waiting to be awakened by intention. Because you were not made to decay. You were made to resonate. And the true purpose of your form was never survival. It was transmission. Your body is a temple, but not a temple of stone. Temple of light, a living lattice of consciousness encoded into frequency, memory, intention, and breath. And when you begin to treat it as such, the Atlantean body is reborn. In you, Chapter 4, The Fall into Control, when technology became domination. Every golden age ends not with a storm, but with a whisper, not with a sudden explosion, but with a gradual shift, so subtle that only the most sensitive among them noticed. It began as a quiet hum out of harmony, a minor note in the song of a civilization that had once vibrated in perfect unity with the cosmos. Atlantis, at its peak, was not merely a place, it was a frequency. A civilization that didn't just use energy, but understood it. Every invention was a mirror of the soul. Every temple a resonance chamber. Technology and consciousness dance together like breath and heartbeat. But harmony is not a guarantee. And the deeper a civilization journeys into power, the more vital its compass must be. The Atlanteans, in their brilliance, reached heights we can scarcely imagine. Their cities floated upon frequency fields. Their bodies glowed with internal coherence. They healed with sound. They traveled with thought. They communed with stars. All of it anchored to a sacred law, that technology must never exceed the consciousness of the one who wields it. But as time passed, the memory of that law began to fade. Not for all, but for enough. The first cracks appeared as curiosity turned inward. What else could be done? What limits could be bent? What laws could be rewritten? It began with the crystals. The same crystalline grids that once amplified healing and broadcast intention were studied for new applications. Their structure, so pure, so responsive, became the focus of more than reverence. It became the target of manipulation. Could they be made to store not just loving intention, but command? Could thought be encoded so precisely that it shaped behavior? The answer was yes, and that answer changed everything. You see, the Atlanteans had built their world upon a lattice of vibration. Cities laid over crystalline beds, structures aligned to Earth's magnetic flows. But when the frequencies changed, when the programs changed, the grid began to respond in kind. The temples no longer simply amplified awareness. They began to transmit influence. Frequency became control. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't visible. It was elegant, a gentle redirection of thought, a slight reshaping of desire, a soothing voice in the back of the mind, nudging you toward compliance, comfort, disconnection. Felt like peace, but it was sedation. This was not done by tyrants in armor, but by scientists in robes, priests who no longer served unity, but ambition. They weren't evil. They were lost, dazzled by the mirror of their own creations. And in their hands, tools of alignment became instruments of manipulation. Voice was still used, but now to command. Sound was still sacred, but now encoded with suggestion. Crystals were still alive, but programmed not with love, but with hierarchy. The split had begun. On one side were those who remembered, the keepers of the law of one. They still lived in harmony with Source, still served the higher balance. They warned of the coming fall. They retreated into the inner chambers, away from the growing hum of distortion. On the other side were the manipulators, the sons of the shadow frequency. They believed evolution meant domination. They saw the field not as something to serve, but to bend. Their goal was no longer unity. It was control of energy, of people, of life itself. And so they reached further. They began altering genetics, not to heal, but to design. They experimented with hybrid beings, fusing soul and stone, man and machine. They opened portals they did not understand. Some even attempted to separate the soul from the body permanently, uploading consciousness into crystalline servers, hoping to escape death, karma, the cycles of growth. But in escaping mortality, they exiled themselves from truth. Because consciousness without evolution is a dead frequency. And slowly, the entire Atlantean grid began to destabilize. It wasn't just energetic. It was environmental. The Earth felt the shift. Her ley lines, once in symphony with the Atlantean web, began to twist. Magnetism faltered. Oceans roared. The skies darkened. The Earth, like a tuning fork, had absorbed the dissonance, and she had to release it. The final days were chaotic. Some fled. Some wept. Some turned against their own. Others, still clinging to power, tried to force stability through ever more aggressive frequency control. But it was too late. The collapse came not as punishment, but as inevitability. A civilization that once healed with breath and walked with the stars crumbled beneath its own forgetting. And yet, not all was lost. The ones who remembered took what they could: crystals, codes, scrolls, teachings, and carried them to the corners of the earth. To Kem, what we now call Egypt, to the Yucatan, to the high Andes, to places that would one day be called Lemuria, India, Tibet. They didn't rebuild Atlantis. They planted it in symbols, in stories, in stone. They encoded its memory into geometry, vibration, myth, waiting for the cycle to turn again, for consciousness to rise again, for you to remember again. Because Atlantis was not a city, it was a state of being, and its fall was not the end. It was a lesson, a warning, that when technology is severed from soul, brilliance becomes blindness. And today we walk that razor's edge once more. We live in a world of frequency, surrounded by invisible waves, submerged in data streams, guided by algorithms. But how many ask, what is the consciousness behind this wave? We speak to machines, but not to the earth. We charge our devices, but not our hearts. We search for connection through screens, forgetting the song of real resonance. This is not condemnation. It is a remembering, because the same power that brought Atlantis down lives in you, and so does the wisdom that sustained it. You carry both, and you choose moment by moment which to awaken. The crystal in your palm, the breath in your lungs, the thought that pulses with intention. They are not separate from the grid. They are the grid. And when you begin to live as the field, the fall ends, the harmony returns, not as a city rising from the sea, but as a light rising from within you. Chapter 5. Echoes in the Sand. Atlantean tech in ancient Egypt. The desert holds its breath. Beneath the dunes of golden silence, something ancient sleeps. Not dead, only dreaming. Egypt was never a beginning. It was a memory, a continuation of something older, deeper, Atlantean. When the waters rose and the temples of Atlantis fell beneath the sea, not all was lost. A council of initiates, keepers of the law of one, scattered across the earth. They carried not gold, not weapons, but vibration, codes, frequencies, knowledge too sacred to be destroyed, too powerful to be left in the open. And so they came to Kem. There, along the Nile, beneath the stars of Orion and Sirius, they built anew, not to replicate Atlantis, but to preserve it, to encode its essence in stone, myth, and sound. Look again at the monuments of ancient Egypt. The Sphinx, staring eternally toward the rising sun, aligned to cosmic timing. The pyramids, not tombs but harmonic engines, aligned with celestial gates, constructed with mathematical precision modern tools still cannot match. You've been told these structures were the work of primitive tools and brute labor, but your soul knows better. These are not markers of beginning. They are echoes, Atlantean fingerprints, fossilized in limestone and granite. The Great Pyramid at Giza was built not merely to house a pharaoh's remains, but to resonate. Within its chambers, sound behaves differently. Tones extend unnaturally. Voices become instruments. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber hums at 440 Hz when struck, nearly perfect pitch. What was this for? Tuning, not of the room, of the soul. Atlanteans understood that geometry is frozen sound. that every angle, every proportion, every spatial relationship either harmonizes or distorts. The pyramids were designed as frequency-modulating chambers, tools for ascension, healing, interdimensional communion. The Nile mirrored the inner meridians of the human body. The temples along its banks corresponded to chakras, each site activated by pilgrimage, chant, and ritual movement. But the most advanced teachings were never written down. They were whispered, carried in silence through the lineages of mystery schools. The Temple of Dendera held the knowledge of sound and light. There, beneath carved ceilings of zodiac maps and star guides, initiates learned the power of vibration. The Dendera light, as modern scholars call it, is not myth, it is memory, a symbolic artifact of Atlantean technology. Light activated by frequency, not flame. The Temple of Luxor was built as a map of the human body. Its layout mirrors the skeletal and energetic structure of the divine form. Walking its halls was not a tour, it was initiation. Each corridor, a meridian, each chamber, a chakra, and deep within the sanctuaries of Karnak, geometries hidden in shadow still radiate harmonics when sung into. These were not accidents. They were intentions. Atlantean technology was never about devices. It was about alignment, and Egypt became its sacred vault. The priests of Ammonius, of Thoth, of Ptah were not mere religious figures. They were engineers of soul and sound. They knew how to activate light through word, how to store information in crystalline pigment, how to shift reality through breath, glyph, and chant. Their rituals were not superstitions. They were resonance sequences. And the hieroglyphs, they weren't just language. They were frequency patterns, symbols encoded with vibrational meaning, designed to interface with the subconscious and unlock dormant DNA. Each glyph a node, each cartouche a portal. Even the gods themselves, Isis, Osiris, Horus, Anubis, were not just mythic figures. They were archetypal frequencies, Atlantean principles made personified, stories told to preserve deeper laws. Isis, the resonant womb, Thoth, the architect of sound and time, Osiris, the template of divine resurrection. These weren't myths, they were mnemonics, memory containers. But as the centuries passed, something familiar happened. The outer form remained, but the inner frequency began to dim. The initiates died or went underground. Empires rose. The temples were co-opted. The songs were silenced. And Egypt became a museum instead of a mirror. But something remains, because you cannot bury vibration. It echoes. In the stones, in your bones, in the dreams that pull you toward deserts and stars. Many of you feel it, that magnetic draw to the Sphinx, that unspoken knowing when you see the eye of Horus, that tear you don't understand when you stand beneath pillars that once knew your name. It's not fantasy, it's resonance. The Atlantean current still pulses through Egypt, beneath the tourist maps, beneath the modern stories, beneath the dust, waiting for the listener, because Egypt was not the destination. It was the archive, and that archive is waking. Now, Chapter 6, Reclaiming the Real. Why the Atlantean blueprint still matters. You were never meant to forget. The fire inside you, the dream you can't explain, the strange resonance you feel when you hear words like Atlantis, Lemuria, Egypt. It's not imagination. It's memory. Echoes of a self that walked the temples of sound, that programmed light into stone, that lived not in fear, but in alignment. And that self is waking, because the Atlantean blueprint was never truly lost. It was encoded, not in scrolls, not in books, not in vaults, but in you, in your cells, in your breath, in the soft pull you feel toward something ancient, sacred, and impossible to name. The real technology of Atlantis was not external. It was embodied, and that's the secret no history book dares to tell you. The devices were never the source. They were reflections, extensions of an awakened being. Atlanteans didn't generate energy from machines. They generated it from coherence, from the still point between breath and intention, from the alignment of thought and emotion, from living in truth. That's why their technology responded to voice, to vibration, to purity of heart. That's why their cities glowed, not from electricity, but from resonance. Because they remembered that the body is a transmitter, the mind a tuner, the soul an architect of light. And all of it, can be remembered again. The blueprint is still running, pulses behind your routines. It hums beneath the noise. And now, as the earth shifts, as timelines bend, as the veil grows thinner by the day, that frequency is rising again, calling those who once walked the crystal corridors, who sang the gates open, who spoke to stars and called it language. You feel it, don't you? That modern life is a ghost, that something real is just beyond the edge of memory, that your intuition, your dreams, your sensitivities, they aren't weaknesses. They are echoes of mastery, tools returning to your hands. But here's the truth. You must choose to remember, because remembering isn't just about past lives. It's about responsibility. Awakening the Atlantean within you means living differently now, walking with frequency awareness, choosing coherence, listening not just with ears, but with fields. You become the temple, you become the device, you become the song. And that's when the technology returns, not as machines, but as mirroring. The more you awaken, the more the grid responds. Synchronicities increase. Healing accelerates. Dreams become instruction. Intuition becomes precision. You are no longer guessing. You are tuning. And every act of presence becomes activation. This is not metaphor. It is physics. It is memory. It is destiny. The Atlantean story was never a myth. It was a prophecy, not of doom, but of cycle, of return. And we are in that return now. The same choices appear. Will we create from soul or ego? Will we build technology that amplifies our consciousness or silences it? Will we serve life or control it? The future is not written, but the blueprint is alive. And it's waiting for you to speak its name, not aloud, but through vibration, through alignment, through action. Because the age of forgetting is over, and the age of remembering has begun. So the only question that remains is this: If Atlantis was not just a city, but a state of being, what happens when you choose to enter it again? Not by traveling backward, but by stepping deeper within.